Okay guys, so today we are fixing the M3, E36 M3. This is the S52 engine. So this video is going to apply to S52, M52. It's also going to apply to M54, but not S54. So there is that. This thing has an issue to where whenever we start it up, it runs fine. Once you drive it for a little bit, it starts getting hot. Let's say 15 minutes. It starts cutting out. And sometimes if you turn the key off and restart it, it'll be fine. Sometimes it won't. It's very random. So it misfires. It will die all at once. So we've seen this many times before. This old man is no rookie to this kind of stuff for BMW. It's like the legacy, right? So this car has 170,000 miles on it. So going back through history, we know that about 150,000 miles or 130,000 miles, we start having issues. Now, as you know, S52 and M52 are basically the same engine. What's different is the size of the bore, and also what's different is the camshafts. It's the same head casting. It's the same, pretty much every sensor on here is the same. So we're going to show you everything about that. We're going to start off with this. And I'm going to change some lights around here. We'll get Philip to come in here and show us this boot on this car. The throttle body's up here, right? On the M54 cars, it's down under the intake. It's slightly different. But if this boot has any kind of rip in it at all, it causes an issue. Now this one does not have the hose. Does it have the hose going on the bottom? Yes, it does. It has the hose going from the bottom down to the PCV. If that connecting hose has a rip in it, or if the PCV, which is under the manifold, if the diaphragm's blown, there's any kind of malfunction where it's going to be able to suck air before the mass airflow sensor, right? It's going to cause a lot of issues. By a lot of issues, I mean you can have all kinds of running rough at random, depends on what's wrong with it. So you have to look for all that. And what I recommend on these cars, to go any further, I'll do like fix it all now so we don't have to do it later on the side of the road. That's about $600 worth of stuff for one of these engines. A little cheaper for S52 and M52, but that's what it takes. So the other thing is the mass airflow sensor. Two things. It cannot be an aftermarket one. It has to be a legit one. I do not see on here a name brand on that. That very well could be the problem, but the nature of it, I don't think it is. Also, we have no check engine light on this car when it does this, right? So an aftermarket sensor here causes a problem. Ill-fitting boot or a hole in any of the rubber lines or boots will also cause the same issue. Very rarely on these cars is it ever the TPS or that's for the ABS flap. It cuts the throttle for ABS flap. Very rarely does that ever have anything to do with it, but it's not impossible. The next thing is your main vacuum line, which is right here. If that split, that's going to allow it to suck air behind the mass airflow sensor. And what happens, if it cannot meter the air coming through the mass airflow sensor through the air box, the car doesn't know there's extra air. It starts freaking out, doesn't know what to do. So check that next. On a few of these, since these cars are getting older, the brake booster could have a rupture in it. That'll cause misfire, but it's not going to be the kind of misfire we have on this car today. Okay? So there is that. Now, the next thing, let me get a screwdriver, and we're going to show you what the next thing is. Okay, so let's take 10 seconds here, and let's pop this off. Also, going to the PCV on the bottom is this hard line, that hard hose. It seems like somebody's replaced that. I did notice the other day when Coil started it, there was a puff of smoke. That's either that PCV is ruptured or the valve seals. More than likely, the PVC is ruptured and is leaking. So let's pop this off real quickly. Take this off, our nice M-Power cover. And here's the ignition coil packs. And I'm going to bring this light over here, I think, while Philip's shining that down in there. there's many things with these you have to look out for. For one, make sure it's some kind of legit name brand. Bremi, Bosch. These look pretty much factory. Somebody's obviously been in here because they're all numbered. I don't know why those would be numbered there, but they are. So I'm not judging anybody. I'm going to pull one out. I'm going to show you here what the deal is. Okay. So somebody's replaced the boots on this, and you can see there's an issue here. I don't know if you can see with this light or not. Let me move the light on this side here, and I'm going to try to get Philip in here and show you guys with that lens. I don't know if it's possible. So you can see right here that coil pack is arcing out. See that? Same way right here, you can see arcing signs right there and right there. It looks like these are factory. Somebody's just changed the boot on this one. And that might be another problem, but that's not the problem we're having today. Another thing is, if you see oil on the bottom of this ignition coil, that could also do bizarre stuff. That can make it so it'll misfire when you turn the key off and back on, it'll fix it. Why that does that, I don't know, but usually it does. Also check your spark plugs. Okay, let's grab the spark plug socket and extension. We're just gonna look and see a general health checkup. Boys, this is what we're gonna do here. So I broke it loose with the old ratchet first. Then we use our little impact to pull it out of here. Now, holy cow. Look at that bad boy. So we got the right plugs, NGK iridiums, but they look rough. These have been there a long time. You can see on the tip, it's all, if you could even get that or not, it's all kind of worn, all stupid. It's got a bunch of garbage on it and all that. So that could also cause misfires, a bunch of issues with that. Also, in the past, these valve covers have an issue with cracking. And if you get a big enough crack in the valve cover, as you notice, the PCV is hooked to the valve cover. So it's pulling vacuum on parts of this valve cover. You get a big crack in it, you'll hear a whistling noise. It'll actually be leaking vacuum through the valve cover. These cars, time you get this age, more than likely you're going to need a new valve cover. I don't know what the price is on these lately, but something tells me we might be finding out, boys. Let's put this back in. We're going to go on to the next thing. If you get that far, and that's going to be more of a misfire all the time, or a startup cold, run rough. Then you can turn it off, start it back up, sometimes it'll go away. Now, hopefully if you have a coil pack issue, it's bad enough to where it throws a check engine light and it tells you what cylinder it is. However, that's not always the case. Usually they won't do that until they get very bad and the car is undrivable. If you try to drive it, if you try to force drive it with one cylinder down, it's not firing correctly, the exhaust will essentially glow red. The EGTs will be through the roof because it's dumping fuel that's not being burned in the engine, but it's igniting in the pipe, right? See that a lot. So I think the problem with this car is the camshaft or crankshaft sensor, because I know at this mileage, it probably does not have the original camshaft sensor on it. And I know at this mileage, the crankshaft sensor likes to get a blister on it. So when we first got the car, I ordered this and it came in yesterday. This is a Bremi. You can buy a Bremi, you can buy whatever name brand sensor you want. And essentially what happens with these is, got a hair on me, dog hair or something, on the very tip. See how it's nice and flat? After time, it'll get like a blister, like a bubble on it. And what'll happen, it's not only just the plastic bubbling out, it's also the inside of the sensor is pushing out. That'll bring this closer to the gear that it reads for the ignition timing. So as the engine heats up, this will pooch out. That'll change the timing and make it do all kinds of weird stuff like this car is doing. Now, here's the next catch. On an M54 car, it's like E39, X5, E36, the block is aluminum. That's good and that's bad. It's good because aluminum block, the bolts don't seize in the block like the bolt for this crank sensor. I'm a little scared on this one to take this bolt out that it might snap off. So if it snaps off, what we're going to have to do is pull the whole intake manifold and everything off And at that point in time, we're going to do the PCV and everything. We'll just do it all. And there's also some coolant lines we got to tend to if we're going to go that far. But this car leaks nothing at all. Not a drip of anything. It's very, very rare for this year not to have any issue. So the same thing could also happen on the cam sensor, which is right here. You can see the little, it's kind of hard to see on this one, but it's right here behind this little motor. So to change this, you got to take this little motor off, use like a 32 mil wrench, you unplug it, and then unless you get to the cam sensor, you can plug it down there. And I don't think that's the issue. I should have bought both of them just because. But there again, it's not a car we have to drive. We still have to do interior stuff for this car. It is back from paint, but it still needs all the cosmetics done. So we're not in a huge hurry for it. There is that. So cam and crank sensor, now if it's M54, it's going to have a exhaust cam sensor and an intake. The S52 and N52 only has the one sensor for the, holding this up, for the cam. They all use the exact same crank sensor, from 1992 up to 2005 is all the same sensor. Now the cam sensors are different, but the crank sensor is always the same. That is a big help when you're going to source one of these. That makes them a little easier to find, but it still can be a challenge to find a good name brand. If you go put a $9 Chinese sensor on this car will not run. If it does run, it'll be unreliable, untrustworthy, and more than likely have a permanent check engine light. So you think at this point, why don't they just make the cheap sensors where they work? Isn't it more work at this point to make a Chinese sensor not work than just make it work? Maybe not. I don't know. So there is that. Now, a lot of guys are going to say, oh, it's the Vanos seals. The Vanos seals are making it run rough. Well, that's not really true at all. I guess if they got it bad enough, they could make it run rough. That's extremely unlikely, though, is a thing. And if we have to take the valve cover off at all for this, we'll rebuild the Vanos. I actually have another single Vanos here for this car. We could rebuild it ahead of time. So when we take it out to do that, we could just swap it out real easy. But usually, that'll just make the car kind of down on power. That will not affect any of that. Now, these older cars, there's no disvalve. There's none of that kind of stuff. All that doesn't exist on it. So it is a lot easier. That's pretty much, I'm trying to think of anything else. In some extremely rare instance, you could have some water in the ECU on E36. E36 is not that common for that, though. So I would say that's more likely, if you think that's what it is, it's more likely not. But we got to check out on this car. If this doesn't fix it, is for sure this mass airflow. Because if that is aftermarket and Chinese, that needs to be replaced too. Like I said, one last time, when you buy one of these cars, you have to assume it's going to need a PCV, it's going to need coil packs, it's going to need spark plugs, it's going to need a throttle body boot, it's going to need a cam or crank sensors, one or all. It's going to need Vanos seals, it's going to need a water pump, it's going to need pulleys, it's going to need thermostat housing and associated hoses. On an M54, which is E39, X5, X3, etc., E46, that's about a $600 bill. I'm telling you this because if you guys are looking at buying one of these cars, you need to be aware. And then that also goes into front control arms, struts, all that stuff. It can go on and on. A base general consensus is $600 if you do the work yourself. S52, I would say probably more like $400. It's a little bit cheaper for the stuff. And that's a baseline of it. Now, like I said, on this car, we got lucky. This car is pretty well kept up. That's a rare thing to find. A lot of you guys, when you're buying E36, if it's any kind of good deal at all, it's going to need two of everything. And that's just a hard fact about it. So that's going to be it, guys, for today's video. Hope you liked it. Hope it gives you guys some insight before you just go jump out and buy one of these. If you have general basic knowledge or even the desire to look stuff up on the internet before you touch it, you can own E36 M3. You can own E39. You can own any of this stuff. You just have to have basic knowledge. These cars, before all the ISTA, you had to have all that stuff to run it. Pre-electronic overload cars. Very easy to operate and work on. And that's it, guys. We'll see y'all later.